Hey there, my name is Shane Craddock, and this is the Inner Edge podcast, where I share a different take on how to lead and live a sustainable high-performance life. Over the course of different episodes, I'm going to challenge the belief that tension, stress, and struggle are essential to success and creativity. My experience is that there's an easier way, there's a better way, and indeed there's an essential way that we need to explore for the times that we live in. So let's go ahead, let's jump in and explore. Hi there, welcome to today's episode. It's been an interesting week this week. I suppose it's been busy in many different ways, but not bad busy. I mean, it's been busy, but not too busy, which is always, for me, the nice way to be, because I don't like when it's busy, bad busy. Today's episode, anyway, is called "When You're Having a Bad Day, Week, Month, Year." Now, before I get into that, I was interviewed this week actually by a gentleman of the name of Gary Fox, who hosts a really, really great podcast himself called The Entrepreneur Experiment. It's the number one independent business podcast in Ireland. Certainly, he's always up there in the top 10 of the charts anyway, consistently. So it's actually very good. He interviews lots of different leaders separate to myself, but people who, if you're interested in business and leaders in business and just getting an insight into how they operate, what they do, really, really interesting stuff. Anyway, this week he interviewed me and he managed to do two things. One is he asked me some questions that I haven't been asked before, which is always exciting from my point of view. And the second thing is, and maybe more importantly, he created a space for me to answer those questions without interruption, which doesn't always happen. And so he managed to drag out of me quite a lot of what I would consider valuable insights and content. So if you're interested in anything in the context, if you're listening to this audio or podcast, I'm assuming you're interested in high performance or being at your best more, definitely check out the episode with Gary. Came out Thursday of this week. So what's that, the 3rd of June? The Entrepreneur Experiment. Have a listen, see what you think. Let me know what you think. And other than that, I would check out the podcast regardless. It's really, really good. But while he was interviewing me, Gary, I was telling Gary a story about myself and my daughter Jane, where we just got a paddleboard recently, and I was just sharing a story about how I managed to get up and use and everything else, but not in as easy a way or as quick a way as Jane did. And I was just saying to him, I had to manage my inner world, my inner voice in terms of my own performance there. Jane didn't even think about it, and that was the key to her being better, to be fair. So as well as the fact that she's physically got better balance. But when I told him that story and I was going through it in more detail in the podcast, he said, it's good for me to hear that. I'm sure listeners will be interested to hear that, even somebody like yourself can struggle with different things. It's a very human side. And I was thinking to myself, well, sure, is that not being human? And it just reminded me that very often we can think that everybody else has it easier, everybody else is different. And I'm lucky over my career over the last 25 years of working with top performers in business, not just business, actually, sports as well, the arts, creativity, film, and just maybe even just the general public. Like the best I've ever worked with, they all have a very human side. You just may not think that they do, but what they generally will do is they generally have figured out, usually unconsciously, by the time I meet them, how to kind of get around themselves or how to get out of the way of themselves. So it reminded me anyway that, when you're having a bad day, week, month, year, everybody has a bad day. Don't be under the illusion that they don't. Now, how people react to their bad days does differ hugely. And I think I'm going to share maybe explore some different angles here with you and see what you think at the end. But a funny story, it reminded me when I was talking to Gary, when he said, it reminded me of a client just about a year after the big crash in 0809. So it must have been 2010 or so. And like a lot of people, I had invested, certainly in Ireland, I had invested in property. And obviously property was hugely damaged and affected in that crash and that recession. And I lost a lot of money, but unfortunately for me, that the decisions I've made on the property side also caused severe stress. They caused cash flow problems, and they actually also nearly caused me to go into bankruptcy. So it was a tricky time, like for many people at that time in our country, certainly globally, actually. But I always remember sitting down with a client, and part of my job is, I'm sitting down and preparing myself for a meeting or conversation. I have developed a skill where I can just literally drop all of my thinking, drop all of my own concerns, and just 100% be engaged with the person in front of me. It just happens at this point. It just happens kind of unconsciously. I don't have to think about it anymore. Anyway, I was sitting down for a chat with a client, and they, at the start of the meeting, said, well, how are you? And it's always nice to be asked, well, how are you? I mean, by somebody who actually means it, which they did. But I don't get asked that all the time. But anyway, I decided to give them a little bit of the truth of my life. And I said, well, and I told them some of the issues around the property area. And they literally, their mouth almost dropped to the floor because they were looking at me stunned like a rabbit in the headlights. And I said, what's wrong? And they said, honestly, Shane, I just never thought you had problems. And when we got into it, I mean, it's funny, maybe you're there listening to this thinking that nobody has the problems you have, or you're the only one, or you're the only weirdo in the room. You can rest assured you're not. Everybody has problems. It's just a question of, A, do we share them? B, how do they affect us? And to be fair, in many ways, if you're a business person, like the bigger the business, or if you own a business, the bigger the problems. Problems never go away. And if you think about it, like, well, why are you having a bad day? Or like, it is going to happen, obviously, to everybody. And I wonder, to me, one of the things that I suppose the changes for me years ago was when I realized that, well, hang on now, what's causing my bad day? So if you're having a bad day, essentially, I guess you're in a bad mood is another way of saying that. But in essence, I kind of think you can track it all down to maybe one particular thing, is that's your inner voice inside, your personal mind doesn't like the way the external circumstances are. That could be because of a situation or a person. It's generally down to because some part of you doesn't like it or doesn't want it. And I always remember another story with a group of clients, a group of entrepreneurs, CEOs, a few years ago. I have a group called the Inner Circle, where we have entrepreneurs who we connect regularly over a year to learn from each other as well. And I share information with them, and holding people accountable, etc. But I always remember one of the entrepreneurs stopped the meeting we're in the middle of, as if he'd been struck by a bolt of lightning. And I said, what's going on? He said, look, I just need to say something. I said, go on. Yeah, what is it? He said, I've just had this amazing insight. He said, I've just actually realized that there's always going to be S01T. And everybody was looking at him and said, what, you're only realizing that now? And he said, no, genuinely. He said, I was working under the illusion that actually nirvana is possible, that I can get to a point where there's just no problems. And I've just realized here, there's always going to be problems, because I've realized everybody here has a different type of problem, and we always have problems. And even though as simple as that sounds, when you actually really realize that and realize, well, actually, there's always problems, there's always something's going to go wrong. People will let you down. Things won't work out. You'll have to divert the boat. That, to me, had not just his statement, I'd seen it a few years before that, where you realize, oh, there's always going to be something. So I just kind of have to take whatever comes. Imagine if you could just take whatever comes or what's presented to you by life every single day and just say, okay, that's fine. This is in front of me. This is reality. There's no reason for me to react to this. It just has to be dealt with. And not only that, what I've seen, and I'm sure maybe you have too at different points, is the challenges that are presented to us by life, by work, by people, if we get into them, if we embrace them, actually make us better. That's pretty cool. So if you realize that within the gift of a challenge, right now, where you are right now, I've no doubt there's going to be problems around you, because that is life. There's challenges, there's problems, there's things to be done and solved. But what if we actually said, instead of looking at them, we said, okay, well, where's the opportunity in this? Because it is going to make you better, even if it's tough. And I always think back to that quote written by Shakespeare. I'm not too sure what play it is, but there's nothing good or bad, but thinking make it so. There's nothing good or bad, but thinking make it so. So things will just happen. Life happens. It's our minds that put a label on it. This comes into, again, to the inner ages. It's our minds put a label on, well, I like this is good, or I don't like this is bad. And we can get stuck into a negative, if we call it that, thinking spiral very easily. It happens to everybody all the time, and that's why you can end up being stuck, as Bono would say, in a moment. And you can have a bad day, and then it could extend into a week or a month or even a year. I've had in my life, definitely, if I look back, a year where I'm thinking, wow, yeah, certainly if I go back even, I don't know, 15, 16 years, I wouldn't be having the best year. And in my looking back, I'm realizing now that actually it was more to do with the way I was reacting to circumstances. Whereas I've probably gone through more challenging circumstances since. But now my mindset is very much what I just described a few minutes ago, is around, well, like life is an adventure. Life's going to throw things at me. That's normal. My job is to take the lemons and make them into lemonade, for want of a better description. I think a very real story that you might resonate with is a client that I was working with in a big tech company, maybe about, 8 years ago. Very well-known tech brand, one of the biggest in the world. And I was working with this leader who had a lot of responsibility, we'll say, for sales in a certain context, a certain area of the company. And I was helping them, I could say, maybe probably in a coaching, mentoring capacity. And they didn't really want to discuss at any point really the inner side of things. They felt that they were strong enough that area. So it was primarily focused on helping them come up with new ideas to get things done better, to influence the people around them, and that kind of thing. And it just moved them towards their goals faster. But on this particular month, when I went down to meet some of the people that I was working with in this company, when this person came in, he was Mr. Droopy Drawers. So he was clearly having a bad day. But on a little bit of exploration with him, we realized he was having a bad 3 months. So he'd been in this kind of bad form for 3 months since the last time I kind of seen that group. And when I asked him, well, why are you in a bad form? Like, what's going on? He wasn't really able to tell me. So we kind of had to stop. Although he was aware that he was in bad form, and he was saying he knew that it was affecting his performance in work. Figures had dropped. He said he was confused because also he was having problems with some of his team members he normally wouldn't. And also KPIs and sales and everything else were being affected. He was fighting with his wife, which he'd never normally do. And, this guy was an avid exerciser. He'd even stopped exercising. And this story now, I think, is universal. I've met so many people, and I've done it myself. But when we started digging into it, there was a flash of a eureka moment, maybe 15 minutes in, when he realized, oh my God, I've just realized, I think I've remembered why this started. And I said, why? He said, well, just you've been asking me about what's been going on, like over the last 3 months, or what happened 3 months ago. And I realized I had a conversation with somebody senior to me, not my direct boss, but had a conversation. And through that conversation, he said something to me, and I got really annoyed about it. I said, well, what did he say? He said, well, and essentially the guy was implying through this comment, he thought that he wasn't going to get the promotion that he'd been working his ass off for 2 years. And it was a big promotion. And I said, all right, well, can you be 100% sure that that's true? And after a little bit of reflection, he said, well, I can't be 100% sure, but I'm 95% sure. I said, okay, so there's 5% chance. It's like your man in Dumb and Dumber. So you're telling me there's a chance. That shows you the level I'm at watching those kind of movies. That's one of my favorite movies. It's very funny. Anyway, getting sidetracked there again, Shane. So I said to him, let's stop the meeting. Can you go off and find that person? And when you found them, have a chat with them, ask them what they meant. Take as much time as you want. I'm here for the entire day, and I'll see you later on. So that's what we did. And off he went. Found the person, and he came back to meet me about an hour and 15 minutes later. And he just looked lighter. He had a spring in his step. And this is the amazing thing about your mind, is when we somehow figure out how to drop what's bothering us inside and what's bothering us ourselves inside. Anyway, you probably guessed it already. He asked the question. The guy was shocked. He said, that's absolutely not what I meant. Why did you think that? And it was the opposite in terms of, it was just a misunderstanding. And the guy misunderstood something that was said in a different way. Now, what's fascinating is the person that came back to me for that second part of that meeting was very different physically. They had more energy. They were brighter. and they just look like they de-age in front of my eyes. And that is the power of actually your inner side, your inner world. If the wrong thought gets stuck in there with you, it can literally sap the life out of you. And as he said to me, he said, I can't believe that one thing, that one assumption that I was making, I was convinced myself that was reality, and it wasn't true. And that's the nature of what we do in our minds. We convince ourselves that we know the truth. And because your minds work like a projector, we then start to experience reality in a different way. Sales drop because, it wasn't his lieutenants that were the problem. He was the problem. His mood had dropped. And then everything else had rippled into that around, with his team. So that's the thing called mood contagion, where like your state or your mood actually tangibly affects people around you. And in a business context, that's interesting, because if it affects people around you, it affects the people around them. That means it's going to ripple into the customers, which is going to ripple into their experience, which means it's going to ripple into cash in bank. As a leader, very important to know, but also as a family, as a parent, as somebody who has friends. Like when your mood's off, it ripples. And here's the thing. What if it's not the circumstances or what you think is happening that's putting you into a bad mood? What if it's something deeper, something inside us? I think it's critically important to think about that. And I'm hoping that some of those stories there might shake something even today for you. And before we go, and before I give you some questions to consider, because as you know, I love the old questions. If you really like the podcast and you're enjoying it, I would appreciate it, again, if you haven't yet, to give it a star rating, to please subscribe, because it does help with the algorithms and everything else that they do. And maybe leave a comment. And certainly if you can, maybe share it with somebody who you think might like it, might enjoy it. And if they're a leader in particular, or somebody who wants to lead better in their life, I think that this podcast for me hopefully is hitting the mark. So what about you? Think about a problem or something maybe is like, what's your mood like, first of all? Are you having a bad day, week, month, year? Are you having a good time? Great. But what's the difference between when you're in a good mood and when you're in a bad mood? What do you think is the difference? To me, the difference is around how we're reacting to what's going on around us. Now, you might say, well, my sales are low, for example, that's why I'm in bad form. And I'm going to say, no, it's not actually. It's more to do with how you're thinking. And the problem is if you're reacting to when sales are bad, just as an example, it's going to affect your mood. And like that's going to affect your state of mind, your energy, and that is going to affect everything then in sales, everything. Because the ability to think clearly, communicate, relate, it's all affected. So here's the thing. What if the struggle when you're in a bad mood is a real problem? But what if it's the way you're reacting almost even to your mood? Because to me, mood is like the Irish weather. It's always changing, but it's our reaction to it. Like, if we're reacting to the mood that we're in, I mean, for me, I can still get into a bad mood. What I mean by that is I can feel the clouds maybe come in where I'm not as energized as normal. In the past, what I used to do is I used to get annoyed at myself for being in a bad mood, and that would make it actually worse. Now, if I feel in any way like my state is lowered, I kind of just, I need to take some corrective action. I might need to rest. I might need to get some exercise. Maybe I need to think about what I'm thinking. And maybe I need to just clarify that, go have a conversation with somebody, or maybe I just need to let it go. Maybe I just need to step outside right now and just go for a walk, take some deep breaths. So your mood does matter, but your reaction to your mood, I think, matters even more. I wonder, does that make any sense to you? Because you can almost feel down or a bad mood. You can almost have your mood affected, but not necessarily be held by it. You can feel anger, but not be held by it. You can feel tension or stress, but actually not be held by it. So maybe you might think about that from your point of view. Maybe if you have been having a bad day or a bad week, maybe it's time to let it go. Maybe it's time to start fresh. Maybe it's time to rethink or question what you're thinking. And if you're in a good mood, great, enjoy. But just watch for the difference the next time the weather shifts inside. Food for thought. Your mood matters, but how you react to your mood matters even more. Food for thought. Bye-bye.